Hi, Travis. We are just getting started here. I've asked for folks to just unmute and tell me a little bit about what they're interested in, just to make sure that I can answer any questions that you have and that today's talk is going to be relevant to you. So do you mind just sharing a little bit about who you are, why you're here? Oh, and I can't hear you. Not yet. You can also feel free to drop a note in the chat if that is easier. Okay, sounds good.
I think I'm in.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, here. All right, great. So my name is Travis Cole Markham. I am here in Chicago, Illinois. I'm a licensed attorney, and I am writing. I'm working on a big legal project that has to do with the National Guard and Reserves and certain benefits that are kind of mismatched for certain people who for instance, a person in the National Guard who's injured doesn't get the same education benefits as an active duty person would get. And so there's kind of an inequity there. And I'm hoping to publish a bunch of things on this topic. And I'm looking at this. So sort of being the Tom Joad of the Reserves and National Guard issues.
Got it. Okay. Great. And we've got Matteo, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. We're just taking a minute and asking folks who they are and why they're here today. So if you don't mind unmuting and telling us briefly who you are and why you're here. And you'll just have to unmute, Matteo.
Okay.
Great.
All right. So I'm Matteo Hevesi. I'm 55 years old, living in Vietnam. I served 18 years in the Marines as an engineer mechanic and a combat correspondent. And I've been in journalism and photography and communications a long time, and I'm happy to be here.
Great. What are you hoping to learn about today, Matteo?
I don't know. I just signed up for the 3 series, and so just like whatever I can pick up.
Okay.
Is fine for me, or just meeting people or spending some productive time in my day.
All right. Sounds good. Well, I am happy to go ahead and get started and run through these slides. I hope some of it's relevant to y'all, and if not, maybe we'll just all learn something new today. So my name is Anika Anand. I'm the Deputy Director at Lion Publishers. We are a membership association for independent news entrepreneurs. So these are folks who have started their own news publications and are publishing, content on them and running them, like small businesses every day. We were founded in 2012 as a professional association, but in 2019 got a bigger grant, which allowed us to build out a staff. And that's when I joined. So for the last couple of years, we have been building out this organization and focusing in on what we want to offer people who are interested in starting something or existing news publishers. So this is a little bit about what we do, what we offer. So we have training programs and resources for folks who want to start news publications. That'll be what I'll be talking about today. We also provide some professional development for existing news entrepreneurs who are currently running their own news businesses. We also offer access to products and services and community support and peer learning. And then we are also trying to find ways to strengthen the industry overall and make it more welcoming and accessible for people who want to start news publications. Okay, so you want to start a news business. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. So like I said, stop me at any time if something is not making sense or sounds totally foreign to you, but that's what I'm going to be talking about today. The good news about starting a news business today is that technology barriers have been significantly lowered. You don't need to pay an exorbitant amount of money for a printing press. You just have to register a URL and you are basically up and running. There are also many more journalism news businesses that you can learn from. We have over 400 members across the US and Canada who are running news publications. And so there's lots of learnings to be had from all of those folks. You don't necessarily need journalism experience. In fact, sometimes not having journalism experience at all makes you even more qualified and better to serve a particular community or group of folks that you're trying to get information to. Overall speaking, there is access to many more resources to help you along in your journey. So those are all the great things about starting an independent news publication. The reality check, so in other words, the not so great stuff, is that there isn't a one size fits all model for being a sustainable news business. The funding pipeline is uncertain. There are still many different ways to earn revenue, but where that revenue is coming from at any given time is going to look different for every news publication. And then, of course, the tech landscape is rapidly evolving. So newsletters are big right now, but they might not be big 5 years from now. Apps have had a moment, and then they didn't have a moment. So you have to stay up on those trends and be nimble. But, the bottom line is that starting a journalism business is just as risky as starting any small business. Many of those fail. But Lion exists so that we can learn from those failures and exchange notes and make sure that folks know how to avoid these common pitfalls that many news businesses sometimes fall into. So broadly speaking, these are a few questions to ask yourself if you're thinking of starting an independent news business. And I will also say these are just good questions to ask yourself if you are a content creator of any kind, trying to get information out to anyone. So I've kept these pretty broad, and hopefully they are useful to you even as you're thinking of specific projects or specific pieces of content that you're trying to get out there. So first of all, first question, just who inspires you? Who are you reading right now? Who are you watching? Who are you following? And that could be specific journalists, specific independent news organizations. It could also just be other experts in your field or people locally who are also producing information, like community-based organizations or other community members. So for me personally, I've got a lot of members that inspire me. One of them is the Sahan Journal, which is an independent news organization based out of Minnesota. They launched in 2019 by a former Minnesota Star Tribune reporter, and he is an immigrant from Kenya, and realized that the Minnesota Star Tribune was really just not covering Minnesota's immigrant communities as well as they could. And so he wanted to launch the Sahan Journal to cover those immigrant communities and provide much more nuanced coverage of that immigrant experience. So They launched in 2019. In that first year, they raised $500,000 in corporate, foundation, and individual donations. They grew their monthly site traffic significantly, and now they are up and running as a full-blown news organization, and they're growing like crazy. They've hired staff, and I think even most recently created a partnership with the Minnesota Star Tribune, which is kind of incredible. You know, this reporter left this very established newspaper, and now this newspaper is partnering with his publication to cover these underrepresented communities in Minnesota. So personally, I find them pretty inspiring. Another question to ask yourself is, who is this for? So this to me is the number one question to think about when producing any sort of project, any sort of type of content. You know, Travis, you were talking about this project that you're working on. You have a very specific, you know, audience in mind. That's great. And a lot of times when we are in the journalism world for a while, we just think of producing content for readers, right? Rather than individual specific people. And so there's an exercise that we have all of our you know, aspiring entrepreneur members do, which is called jobs to be done. It's a little technical, it's a little wonky, but the basic idea is to get away from this high level, you know, goal of, I'm going to start a news publication because people want to read more news, or I'm going to start a news publication because local news is dying. We have to get a lot more specific about who this product is for, because at the end of the day, it is going to be a product that you want people to read. And so this is the basic premise of jobs to be done. It's this one sentence at the top of the slide. So when blank, I want to blank so I can blank. And basically what you'll do is insert into each of these blanks who the person is that you're trying to reach and what they want from you so that they can get a certain thing. So just as an example, you know, if you are interested in trying to help people navigate the housing market, and you know, it's a crazy housing market right now, and you're trying to help folks understand the local trends and what's happening, this might be, you know, these might be a series of jobs to be done statements that you'd come up with. So when I'm a first-time home buyer looking to make an offer, I want to know how to estimate the value of a home objectively so I can avoid making emotional decisions and paying more than the market rate. So, and you can read the other couple examples here as well. So the idea of this is, once you have these really specific jobs to be done that your readers are going to want, you can create content that is tailored for them. And it makes it much clearer to know what your value is to them, rather than just putting more content into the world because you can, which we see a lot of news publishers do. And it's tempting because, you know, we all have a certain idea of what local news looks like, or what, you know, national news looks like. But at the end of the day, we're all deciding what to do with our time based on, you know, what we're getting out of it. And so that's what this exercise gets at. The next question that we really push news entrepreneurs on is, what's your MVP? So MVP stands for minimum viable product. And it's basically the simplest version of your idea that you can build to test this larger idea that you have. So we have a lot of folks, you know, who will come to us and say, I want to launch an app, or I want to launch this, you know, multi-vertical website. And we'll say, that's great. That's awesome. But what is the simplest thing you can build without spending a ton of money or a ton of time, just to make sure that you can get this in front of people who will be using it and understand whether it's worth putting more of your time into it. So a classic example of this is Box.com. If y'all are familiar with that news site, they actually launched an MVP of that site years ago in under 9 weeks. So they put together a very basic version of the site, got it out there immediately, and then continued to refine that and build on it over time after they had actually launched that, you know, that first version. And what this does is it gives you really useful information about how people are using your product or service before, you know, again, as I've said, investing just a ton of time and a ton of money into making it absolutely perfect, or what you think is perfect. So that is a big tip that we give a lot of folks. And so what this might look like, for an independent news publisher is maybe launching an Instagram account first, which is very low touch, easy to get off the ground, or launching a newsletter first before launching, a full big website. So that's something to consider. Another question we have folks ask themselves is, why you? Why should you be the one to take on this project, create this content, or create this website? So I think, going back to that example of the Sahan Journal, which was started by Mukhtar Ibrahim, he was born in Somalia, spent his childhood in Ethiopia and Kenya. And when he came to Minnesota, he felt that deep in his bones that, the immigrant communities were being overlooked. So he just had a really compelling story for why he should be the person starting this publication. And that helps, especially if you are relying on fundraising or development as part of your revenue strategy. And you can really show funders why you and your perspective is the one to deliver this information. Last couple questions here. So, how will this endeavor be sustainable? This is a word, sustainability is a word that gets talked about a lot in the journalism industry. At Lion, we've been thinking a lot about what sustainable looks like. And we actually think it's not just about making money. It's also, there are other things at play. So, we think about journalistic sustainability, financial sustainability, and operational sustainability. And basically, where those three things intersect in that Venn diagram is where overall sustainability is achieved. So financial, you got to be financially healthy. Basically, are you making enough money to put food on the proverbial table? You have to be journalistically, impactful. So how are you going to make sure that you're putting out quality work? And then you also have to be operationally resilient. So, at a very basic level, how do you just not burn out? How do you make sure that you're hiring and retaining the best talent? So a lot, again, of questions that small businesses face, but it is impossible to answer all of those questions before you actually launch a business. However, we have found that many of our members who just have access to a list of these questions ahead of time and can be thinking them through one by one are in just a much better position to think about what it looks like to create a publication that could last, 5, 10, 20 years from now. And then this is the last question that we ask folks, which I think really is one of the most important ones. What do you need to take the next steps? And obviously money is a big part of that. You have to think about what your compensation needs to look like, what it's going to take for you to feel financially secure. But there's also lots of other questions. You have to think about what kind of work energizes you, what kind of work drains you, what are the strengths that you bring as a leader, what are some weaknesses that you might have, and what does success for you look like? What would it take for you to continue to want to work on this thing? And again, just being intentional about that upfront will make sure that you're taking on this project at a time when it feels right for you. So all of this is in our News Founder Challenge, which you can sign up for. It's just a 6-part newsletter series that asks a version of these questions and also gives a lot more specific guidance on how to walk through them. It's free. We just launched it with the revision of our Startups Playbook, which I also included a link to here. These are additional resources that we have created at Lion. So there is this very comprehensive Startups Playbook that we created that really takes folks step by step through all the questions needed to consider for launching a news business. We also have a boot camp program that we will probably be doing a couple more of later this year. We have one in Canada running right now, and that's an 8-week program that helps folks take their idea to fruition. We also have our news entrepreneur community, which is full of other folks who are currently running independent news businesses or who are interested in launching news businesses. We have a membership tier for aspiring news entrepreneurs at Lion, which is basically a discounted full membership to Lion. And then we also have a weekly newsletter that rounds up tons of opportunities for folks, as well as spotlights the work that many of our members are doing. And this is a slide I put together on what I wish I had known before I started. So just a little bit about me. I've been in journalism for about 10 years and started a news publication in Seattle with a parent company about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And it was my first time starting something, but really had no idea what I was doing, and learned a lot from the experience. And really, that experience is what motivated me to take this role at Lion, because I wanted to be able to create resources for folks who had no idea what they were doing. And so a few things that I learned from starting the Evergrey in Seattle, which was the name of that publication. It's okay to start with a much more specific target audience and grow broader over time. The more specific you can get about who you're reaching is actually better. I've seen so many folks say, this is a publication for, I'm based in Seattle. This is a publication for all Seattleites. And it's like, you think that's specific, but not at all. And you can get 10 times more specific than that. Also just learned really clearly the definition of what it means to be an independent news publication. So at the time I was hired by this company who paid my salary to launch the Evergrey. We were part of this what was going to be a network of sites. And while I was very grateful for the financial security, at the end of the day, it was not my publication. It was their publication. And so I definitely learned that lesson the hard way. Another big takeaway was just, we were very community oriented, and we believed a lot in listening to community feedback. But at times that definitely became overwhelming to balance with my own vision for what the publication was. And so figuring out those boundaries early on would have been really valuable for me. And then, of course, my last takeaway is everything's a learning opportunity. So the publication certainly did not turn out how I wanted it to. It does still exist in some kind of weird form that I don't particularly, it's not exactly what I would have loved to see. But I look back on that experience and I just think about how much I learned from it. And what I wish I would have told myself, when I started it, is that there's still going to be plenty more opportunities to build things in the future. This is not, going to be my only shot at starting something. And that's it. So, that's Lion Publishers. That's what we do. And happy to answer any questions that folks have, or you can feel free to follow up with me afterward.
Okay, so I do actually have a couple. One of them is, I know you talked about success in terms of journalistic capability and sustainability. Are there any other metrics that you would use for measuring success?
Yeah, so when we think about the sustainability of a news publication, we are thinking about the success of a news publication. So it is financial health, which is just at a very basic level, are you bringing in more money than you're spending? And can you put food on the table? Basically, can you pay your bills? And then there's this journalistic impact. So there's lots of different ways to measure journalistic impact. Qualitatively, you can track whether people at City Hall are talking about your work, whether your work has gotten laws changed, policy changed. And then there's also quantitative impact. How many people are you reaching? How is that audience growing over time? So every publication kind of has to define for themselves what impact for their work is going to look like. And then the final piece is this operational resilience. So again, can you hire and retain great talent? Is everyone on your team totally burnt out? Do you have some sort of succession plan? Like, could this thing live on without you, if you were to leave, or if you weren't able to do this work anymore? So there's lots of questions that relate to that operational capacity as well. So, I don't think there's just one set of metrics for every publication. Our goal in creating, those three categories and listing out all these questions within them is to just get folks thinking about what what the long-term sustainability of their publication is going to look like. Again, whether this thing could last 10, 20 years from now, 100 years from now. And to me, that's the best starting place for thinking about what long-term success looks like.
Gotcha. Okay. So in terms of a business plan, you would definitely want to work that into it, the answers to those questions. Is there anything else that you would add in when creating a business plan, or you would suggest?
Yeah, I mean, lots of things. That's probably its own webinar in itself, but I think, certainly just like the market value that you bring. So what is unique that you are doing compared to what other people are doing in this space? And that question, why you? Why are you the one to do it? And not just comparing yourself, again, this is in the journalism context, but not just comparing yourself to other news publications, but just to anybody else in the community that's disseminating information. There's tons of great community-based organizations, nonprofits, that are putting out good factually based information, and they're doing it through Facebook, through Instagram, through newsletters. So you are competing with those news sources as much as you are with other news sources. And so when you're putting together that business plan, you have to be able to answer that question, why? Like, why should I exist compared to everything else that's out there? I'd say that's one of the most important questions to be able to answer, because that business plan is going to be the basis for starting to pitch your publication to potential investors or funders or donors.
Okay, perfect. And then another question. I know you deal mostly with the training side, trying to train people to create their own news publications. I'm sure you've seen some failures in the past or some mistakes that have been made. What would you advise people to avoid doing when creating their plan, when starting up, everything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one is just that people who want to create a local news publication because local news needs to exist, it's just not a compelling enough reason. It resonates with lots of folks in the journalism community because that's our profession. But, at the end of the day, you really need to have a very specific target audience, and you need to have a very specific idea of what they want. And again, not to sound like a broken record, but why you're the one to give it to them. So folks who can really hone in on that question and deliver on that question, I've seen be much more successful than, folks who just are very driven by passion alone. And this is certainly one of those situations where passion is just not enough. You have to be able to really articulate a need and how you're filling that need as well.
And then last one from me, I think is, so you mentioned local news not necessarily being enough of a reason. So how would somebody who's interested in starting a publication of their own for local news, how would they narrow down that target audience? Would they have to go out and do like market research? What would they have to do?
Yes. Yeah. I didn't get a ton into this with the jobs to be done slide, because there's just a ton there, and just trying to define what your community needs are. But we advocate strongly for folks going out and doing research interviews. It's called market research, like more professionally and more formally, but it's really just like what journalists do all the time. It's just interviewing people and asking questions. And so we really, it's part of our 8-week boot camp to get folks to go out and do that kind of, do those kinds of interviews and do that kind of research, and then basically take all of that information and look for themes and synthesize and figure out what the common points are so that they can start to build out their jobs to be done. You definitely want those to be informed by what actual people have told you that they want in their life. So to your point, if you went out and asked your friend right now, wherever you live, what kind of news do you wish you were reading right now? Like, no one can answer that question, right? I mean, they might say something because they feel like they're supposed to say a certain thing, like, oh, I'd really like to learn more about what City Hall is up to. But like, the majority of people are not going to say that. What they might say is, I want to know why my taxes, my property taxes increased by 20% this year. Like, what is going on with that? And that is a very specific, thing that can inform a job to be done that your publication can answer for them. But we just have to, when it comes to thinking about what news consumers want, we have to think a little bit less like journalists and a little bit more like, I don't know if business people is exactly the right characterization, but we just have to be able to think put ourselves more in the shoes of readers, people who, are not creating journalism day in and day out, but are just trying to find time to learn what's going on around them.
And how would you recommend when people are doing these research interviews? They're probably going to get all different answers. So how would you recommend them compiling that into one job to be done?
So what's interesting is the question I get asked all the time is, how many interviews should I do? And once you start hearing the same themes, that's when you'll know you've done enough interviews. If you're not hearing any of the same things, then you got to talk to more people because there are definitely themes in what people want. And that's what's going to allow you to distill those into the jobs to be done. And I have yet to find someone who hasn't found any themes in their user research. But if you aren't finding any themes, I'd say like maybe revisit the topic or maybe revisit the questions that you're asking, because I'm sure there's certainly something there.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to open the floor to anybody else who would like to ask any questions, or if you'd like to present your ideas for publications, just to ask for some advice, absolutely feel free to do so.
Okay, I'll go. I started a cooking show on YouTube in 2020, and I did 52 editions for season 1. And I'm kind of on a break now. I'm about to fire it back up for season 2. And I like that. It's pretty easy to do because I've been cooking since age 10, and I love cooking. It makes me happy. It's my happy place. And so I do a weekly show. It's about an hour to 2 hours long, and I have fun. And I have studio guests come in, and they can come in the kitchen and nose around or cut stuff or help or ask questions. So I did that, and I've got ideas for more online, like podcast type style stuff, and maybe some comedy type stuff. I'm an amateur comedy writer. It's kind of like a hobby of mine. But on the topic of journalism, wow. So when I was a kid, people got their news from the newspaper and from the network 6 o'clock news. And everybody did that. So you really had limited resources for news back in the day, 70s, 80s, early 90s. Then when the internet came along, just every year you had, a couple million more choices of what you can spend your time consuming in media. So year by year now, you see the newspapers closing, and you see all these niche websites and podcasts and blogs popping up, and everybody's a reporter now. And there's really, I watch a guy, you ever heard of Jimmy Dore?
Don't think so, no.
D-O-R-E, Jimmy Dore. He's a comedian. He was a very, very liberal type guy. I think he's from California. I grew up in San Francisco, so I grew up in that pretty liberal type society. But then I did 18 years in the Marines, and I was kind of like really mixed up on, am I red? Am I blue? Am I something in the middle? But so I think journalism is like very endangered species, like real journalism, because now all media, all traditional media is owned by big corporations, and they're all intertwined with other corporate interests, such as the medical industry and the retail sales industry. And to do real reporting, really kind of like almost doesn't exist anymore. Are you familiar with Project Veritas?
Yes.
So Project Veritas, they were created about 4 or 5 years ago, I want to say. And that was a group of real solid journalists who were disenfranchised with what was happening in the traditional media world. You know, they couldn't really do hardcore investigative reporting and journalism because the editors were controlled by the corporate advertisers. And you know, if they didn't like the tone of a story because it could potentially affect their bottom line, they would, you know, tell the editors that they were dissatisfied and that they may not want to continue an advertising relationship with their organization. So of course the editor will go to the reporter and say, we can't do that. I'm going to kill the story. So this group of people formed Project Veritas, and you know, they had this idea to continue the tradition of, you know, real journalism and investigative reporting. And I don't know if you follow the news, but Project Veritas now has been like assaulted by Department of Justice, FBI, and they're really having a lot of legal struggles. And I don't know if they're going to survive. So
Yeah.
if somebody, my point is that if you want to do, this is just the way I see the world. If you want to do journalism, like traditional journalism, like you learned in college, because you get a degree or you get some experience reporting for a local weekly or whatever, and then you're really fired up because you believe in journalism, and I believe in journalism. I think it's very, very important that people know what's going on in government and their community and society and all that. It's very important. But people don't care these days. They really don't. I mean, majority of people don't care. They're busy on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and all that. And they're just, you know, they're not like, why would I want to read the news? It's such a downer, and pretty much you can't really believe in what you read anymore because you don't know what's true. So anyhow, that's the reason I chose to do culinary reporting. So, you know, my journalism is reporting recipes that are, you know, healthy and good, and you know, it's an education for the audience to learn something new.
That's
and
great.
So I think, you know,
That's
if you want to start something new, journalism is good, but journalism is difficult.
Totally. That's a good bottom line. I mean, you had a couple of questions. I just want to make sure that we've got time to get to any questions you might have.
Yeah, sorry, I was clicking on the old Zoom and trying to enter an ID. So sorry for coming here late. So my first question is, how can we access the recording of this? Because I missed like the good chunk of it. And my second question is, boot camp. You mentioned boot camp. Can you, if you mentioned, I'll just look at the video. But if you have not, like the boot camp, and what are the requirements to become a member of Lion? Your part of what are the requirements to be a member of Lion? So I'm gonna just find them. And have you seen someone do something around either new Americans, immigrant communities, or kids? Okay, sorry. And then the last one, I promise. And is print still like this future for print, for like just like paper, like the whole like big papers? Thank you. Sorry. So many.
That's great. Lots of questions. Okay, so yes, I know the recording will be available, so I'm sure Devin will share that with you. We have done 3 different boot camps in the past. We're going to do a couple more. They'll just be US based this year. I'm not sure where you are based, but they're going to be US based and probably regionally focused, so that we can really encourage folks in particular communities to want to start something. Your other questions, what it takes to be a Lion member. So we have 2 different tiers of Lion membership. One is a full Lion member organization, and that, you know, you have to meet certain requirements about being an independent news organization, and being you know, having it really be something that you are trying to make money on. So not a hobby, but something that you're trying to build a business out of. And our more detailed criteria is on our site, which, you know, we can send you links to after this. The other tier of membership is for aspiring news entrepreneurs. So these are folks who want to launch something or have launched something in the past year. and basically want additional support and want to be part of a community to get there. So they get all the same benefits as a line member organization. We just discount that membership for a year. And that's another option for folks. The only thing we ask for that membership is to provide some sort of basic business plan. It can still be really simple, but it has to at least articulate what your idea is and what you're doing to actively work on it. And what were your other questions? Oh, immigrant communities. So yeah, I did talk about an example actually earlier on in this talk of this publication based in Minnesota called Sahan Journal, if you're familiar with them at all. But the person who started that publication was a former Minnesota Star Tribune reporter who was was born and raised in Africa, and saw that the immigrant population wasn't being covered as well as it could by the local news in Minnesota. So he started the Sahan Journal, and they've been incredibly successful and seen a lot of growth there. So they are focused on that specific region of Minnesota, and I think they're starting to grow a little bit to the surrounding area. And there are a couple of other examples I know of publications focused on immigrants in specific states or areas. So I'm happy to share those with you as well. And then did you have any other questions? Did I miss one?
Yes, sorry. The last two things. Anything on kids or like young people? And is there still some meat in the
print,
the
right?
huge paper? Sorry.
So for kids, I'd probably have to ask you to be a little bit more specific on that. Like if there's like a national news publication geared toward kids. I don't really know of anyone that's doing a great job. I think that there have been different examples over the years of like news publications trying to create news for kids, but I know that the New York Times most recently is trying to launch a kids section for their news publication. So that's what I'm familiar with at this point. There's also a project called the News Literacy Project that actually tries to teach kids how to become more news literate by bringing journalists into schools. And then they have like a whole training program, which is pretty cool. And then print, is there a future for print? It depends on who you ask. I do think that there are still some instances where print makes a lot of sense for a publication, especially if they're trying to reach certain communities that just aren't online or aren't digitally savvy. I think it makes sense. Or for marketing purposes, I think it can still make sense to have a print product as part of your publication. But whether the world or our economy can sustain a daily print publication where all the news is fit to print, kind of mentality, I personally don't think that's the future we're going to live in. But that doesn't mean that print's not going to be a part of information dissemination in some way.
Does anybody else have any questions? Feel free, if you have any ideas for publications that you'd like to start, feel free to discuss them. We'll give some feedback and stuff.
Oh, Travis, you're muted again.
Let's try that. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Lit up. All right. I seem like such a Luddite with this technology here. We've only been doing this how long? So
only 2 years.
Yeah. Anyway, I kind of talked about it earlier. Again, I'm a licensed attorney. I'm one of these people that has these unique characteristics, and there's part of it that doesn't seem really fair. So I'm taking on this advocacy role. It's sort of a pro bono legal project I'm doing and stuff. And it's people like me who are partially disabled service-connected veterans and who didn't receive the entirety of the GI Bill education benefits, and as a result have very large student loan obligations. So I'm making the argument in all of this that, of course, there's whataboutism, there's what about, all that stuff. I hate whataboutism, it's terrible. And I plan on putting out little content things just like that about the scourge of whataboutism and such. But taking this, a person joins the reserves or National Guard. They go and do their drill weekends, and then they're deployed, and they get injured in combat, and they're sent home, but they're not 100% disabled. Okay, so the rules at the top are different than the rules in between. So they're somewhere between 0 and 90% disabled, which 90% is a lot. So the education benefits were written in a different time, before there were so many injuries that were reported later. And so the GI Bill is written on the length of active service that a person has done. So you could be a 70% disabled veteran and only a 40 or 30% rated education benefit for the GI Bill, because you didn't have that much active time around all of that. And so there's no accommodation for that. So my argument is, a person joins the Reserve or National Guard. It goes, it's sent abroad, sees some sort of combat, is injured, and he's told to go on with a pittance and try to keep your life going on, good luck. And so I make the argument that maybe there's some unfairness in that, and that there's something that can be done. We're in the age of student loan forgiveness and stuff. So what I'm trying to do is I'm filing Freedom of Information Act requests, finding out the population of people who were in the entire past 22 years or so, how many people joined the Reserves or National Guard? And then of that population, how many people were disabled in a service-connected capacity? And then of those people, and I realize that this is where things, like, the reason I'm doing this is because I'm a lawyer, because I may have to file a lawsuit or start lobbying, because I want to find out if there's any way to get information where the amount of student loan debt that population has. And so that would be putting that list with the Department of Education and stuff. And so getting one government department to talk to another, you need a lot more than a letter writing campaign and stuff. And so there's only so much I could do with my Freedom of Information Act requests. Part of the reason I'm in this journalism thing is because I've got to make like content on this. And so I'm here learning. We did the one on Friday, and this one's great. I really like this program. I like the sound of this. This scratches a lot of itches I've got, because I do need some training. I do need a lot of the things that I'm reading here and stuff. So I make that pitch completely unprepared to do so. I'm still in my infancy. I'm still working on the Freedom of Information Act requests, which I hope to get out this week. Thank you for taking this time for us.
That's great. I guess one comment I would make is, journalists are always careful to not be seen as advocating for one thing over the other. And that is debated sometimes and debated more now than it ever has been, in terms of whether journalists should have certain biases or not. The one type of journalism I've seen more recently that's handled this question pretty well is called solutions journalism. So it's this idea that we should report just as vigorously on the solutions that are working to problems as we should on the problems themselves. And so one way to think about writing this piece is considering what potentially other I mean, I don't know what would be analogous to this, but if the department has made accommodations for other vets in other programs, and being able to point to that as an example of a way to make your argument rather than just directly making your argument, might be a way to tell this story journalistically, just to show that there are other ways of solving this problem rather than just pointing out the problem itself, right? This might be a situation where what you need to do is just point out the problem and call it out, which, you know, you can certainly do. And I think that there are other ways of journalistically telling the story that can push people to action, to informed action, you know, and that's the benefit of journalism as well, because it's presenting really thoroughly researched solutions to problems that you know, lawmakers or policymakers could consider advocating for themselves. And I can drop that link in here too.
So to be clear, I am an attorney and I am advocating for this. So my goal is to actually effectuate things. Am I not the right person for this kind of program? Or
I defer to Devin on that.
I won't sit here and pretend that I'm going to be objective on this, because it's something that affects me, and I know there's other people that this affects, and it also helps me with my law practice because I can create other content kind of around it and stuff. And so I guess maybe I'm not the right kind of business.
So just to be clear, you're looking to write journalistic pieces that kind of lobby, in a sense, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, you definitely could do that. One thing I would consider is maybe, instead of writing them as a lobbying piece, maybe write them as an interview with the people that are affected. That would probably be the more efficient way to get your point across, because then they're hearing directly from these people. When you take these articles to others, you can say, hey, this is what this person has said. This isn't necessarily my idea. So that would be something I'd consider.
Yeah, I mean, so Travis, I think this brings up a whole, you know, this brings up the whole discussion and debate about what is journalism, especially with everyone, you know, Matteo was actually talking about this earlier, with everyone being able to create content. What is journalism versus content that's being put out there? This is a much bigger philosophical question. I'm not going to put out a ton of my opinions on it, but all I will say is that, you know, what news and newspapers had going for them a couple decades ago is that they were the only game in town, and no one had any choice but to trust what they were reading in the newspaper, because it's mostly just what they had. You know, there's lots of exceptions to that, but you know, generally speaking, that's.
Sorry to interrupt, but the ownership was diversified back then. Now you have a very, very concentrated, just a couple dozen owners of all the media, all the major media.
Sure.
The traditional media.
This is the problem, though. If I just go and talk to 5 people, that's anecdotal. If there's 24,000 people that have the same thing, those 5 people aren't a representative sample of all the issues. So if I'm trying to get the real data that comes from the Department of Veterans Affairs and from the government, who will have this information and be able to provide it to me. It's unadulterated reporting on factual information that doesn't exist now, which is why I have to go through this Freedom of Information Act request process.
You can do something like that. In 2008, I built a website on WordPress called the Military Suicide Report. And I'm a suicide survivor, so it's very near and dear to my heart. And what I would do is I would scour the net, you know, local newspapers, national newspapers, websites, and I would capture kind of like Drudge Report style, captures stories and photographs of news reports of veterans who killed themselves and the impact of that and everything related to it, you know, healthcare and all that, mental health care. And so the site like really got popular, and actually a lot of journalists were going there as a resource because people just didn't know that 22 veterans every day kill themselves, when it's actually higher than that, you know, when you factor in, you know, guys who get on their motorcycle and plow into a concrete wall. That's not really considered a suicide, but it is. I mean, you know, and then drug overdoses, that's normally not considered suicide. So the number is much higher than 22 per day, and still is. And DOD, for everything they say about suicide, you know, one's too many and we got to stop it and it's our highest priority. That's bullshit. For every veteran that dies, the government saves about $3 million in lifetime benefit payouts. So they're not going to try and stop suicide. So I really saw like the general public had no idea that this was happening to the veterans. And this is amazing. Since 9/11, more than 800,000 US military veterans have killed themselves. Now think about that. I bet you none of you probably knew that number. Am I right? Shocking, right? But it's not reported. And I stopped. Wait a minute. I stopped doing the website in 2016 because newspapers stopped reporting suicides.
Well, I'm not dependent on newspapers running things.
Well, I'm just saying you can do whatever your topic is, and your topic is the lack of benefits for people that have a service experience like you. That's a good topic because you're not alone. I mean, there's a lot of guys and girls like you. So it's a good idea. You can do it. All I'm saying is, like, you know, my topic was suicide. Your topic can be your topic. All you got to do is get the experience of how to get information. FOIA is one way. There's many other ways. Connect with some of the service support organizations. There's a good one in San Francisco called Swords to Plowshares. They're great. They've been around forever. And you just learn as you go and start small. Build you a website and get an idea and just do it. Just start. That's my advice.
I have a question.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay. So just like a clarifying question. So this is a little bit different topic. So Lion, does that mean that your members have to have something online, or can they be also in print?
So all of our members are primarily focused on digital publications. Most of them are online only, but some of them might have a print product that complements that.
Second question, have you seen things like this, like feature magazines that are like on supermarkets, like they come in different topic, like this one is about Muhammad Ali. Mm-hmm. Like would your boot camp also, like if I'm interested like in having something like this published, like one, like, do you know anything about publishing something like this? If you are not live, if you're just like a normal person, something that get like that wider distribution, and yeah, any feedback on that? Sorry.
So the idea being, like, do you want to print a publication like that on a topic that you would want to specifically print? It's very expensive. Oh. is the short version, which is why a lot of people are doing things online. The publications that you see in print, you know, in grocery stores or being sold, you know, at brick and mortars, most of them have been around a very long time. A lot of them are probably bankrupt because it's very, very expensive to publish in print. So most folks do not start there. They might do the online thing for a while and then create a print publication. Yeah,
that makes sense. This is $15.
Yes.
It's not cheap.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. This is the last call for questions. If anybody has anything else they'd like to ask, feel free.
So just two things again, just to verify. How can we get in touch with you, Anika? And where would I get like the recording of this? Thank you so much. Thank you.
So the recording will actually upload on our YouTube channel within a few days after this webinar. Tomorrow is day 3, so we may wait and compile them all together, but we'll see how we roll down on that one. And we will go ahead and send it to anybody who would like it. So if you'd like it, absolutely feel free to send me or anybody at MVJ an email, and we can get that link sent to you once it's published.
And I'm happy to provide my contact information to Devin, and she can pass that along as well.
Absolutely.
Vietnam is very, very interesting because it's like, as far as publications, like print publications, it's like the 1970s, early 80s. There's like, in Ho Chi Minh City, Saigon, there's like 10 daily newspapers. And so people still like to hold the paper in their hand and read it. And it's very interesting.
Are they able to keep printing costs much lower? Is that, do you think that's why?
All their media here, with a few exceptions, is state funded, government funded. But I mean, the reporting is great. I mean, they report on murders, rapes, accidents, corruption, everything. I mean, it's very, very old school journalism here in Vietnam. And it's kind of weird because you would think it wouldn't be like that in a communist country. But it is. I mean, you know, they run page 1 stories about, you know, this minister in this province was convicted of corruption, and you know, it's they really do journalism here in Vietnam. It's great. I love it.
Okay, well, if nobody else has any questions, thank you so much to everybody for being here. We appreciate you coming to day 2 of our entrepreneurial journalism webinar. And thank you so much to Anika for hosting. We appreciate it. If anybody would like the link to the recording, feel free to send me an email or anybody again at MVJ. And then we will see you all tomorrow for day 3 of this webinar.
Take care. Nice to meet y'all.
Nice to meet you too.